Welcome to Night Stories from VHS Era. You've arrived at a place where the glow of old television screens, the hum of rewinding tapes, and the softness of forgotten childhood dreams come alive once more. Each night will take a quiet journey back in time to sleepy suburbs, moonlit driveways, warm summer breezes, and the kind of memories that feel just a little too magical to be real. Here you don't need to worry. Just press play and let the night unfold. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a moment to slow down. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it gently. And now, exhale slowly through your mouth. Let the day melt away with that breath. Again, breathe in deeply. Feel your shoulders soften. Now, release and let go of everything you don't need to carry right now. Imagine you're lying on a cozy bed in your childhood room. Outside, the wind hums softly. The light from a small lamp glows like a warm memory, and the sound of a distant VHS tape spinning fills the air with comfort. You are safe. You are still. And the night is yours. Let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome back to Night Stories from VHS Era. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're somewhere quiet, maybe already tucked into bed, or simply letting the night settle around you like a warm blanket. Tonight's story is a soft echo from the past. A time of mixtapes and pencil-sharpened cassette tapes, of neon lights flickering through mall windows, and the unmistakable scent of Fruitopia in the air. Have you ever waited weeks just to ask someone a single question? Do you remember the nervous excitement? The way your heart raced while you rehearsed what you'd say? Have you ever dreamed about how they'd smile back? How everything might change with just a yes? Stay with me until the end of this story, and I'll take you back to one of those nights. The kind of memory that lingers quietly in the background of your heart. By the end of this video, you'll remember exactly what it felt like to be 16 again in the 90s, planning something so small and yet so unforgettable. It was late April in 1996. The school cafeteria still smelled like cardboard pizza and chocolate milk, the kind that came in those little square cartons that never quite opened right. My friends and I had taken over the corner table near the vending machine, the one that always hummed louder than it should. It was a Thursday, and even though the weekend was just around the corner, all anyone could talk about was the prom. Not the decorations, not the theme. It was always something like Under the Stars or Moonlight on the Hudson. But about who was going with whom, and most importantly, how they were going to ask. Back then, you didn't just blurt it out. There was an art to it, a strategy, and even though I wasn't the type who normally needed grand gestures, something about her made me want to try. Her name? I'll leave it unspoken for now. It's better that way. You'll feel her in the way I describe her. The way she tied her flannel shirt around her waist, how her Walkman headphones were always around her neck, never over her ears. She liked Tori Amos and those sour watermelon candies they sold at the corner store. I remember sitting on my bed that night, a worn poster of the Smashing Pumpkins curling at the edges on my wall, trying to come up with something original. I had this idea about writing the question on the inside of a Snapple lid, but then I thought she might not even like Snapple. What if she was a clearly Canadian kind of girl? Or worse, what if she didn't even notice? I rehearsed the words out, loud. Hey, so, would you go to prom with me? No, that sounded too casual. I was wondering if maybe you'd want to go to prom, like, together? Better, but still not quite right. It was like I was trying to crack a code that only she held the answer to. I even tried recording myself on a blank Maxell tape to hear how I sounded. I didn't like what I heard. My voice cracked. I sounded too unsure. I asked for help. That was rare for me back then. My best friend Matt was the one I trusted most. He always had a way of making everything seem simple. We sat on his porch swing, the kind that creaked just slightly with every sway, sipping surge and watching the sun sink behind the old maple trees. I asked him, "How do I do it? How do I ask her and not sound like an idiot?" He shrugged, smiled, and said something I still remember. "Just say what you'd want to hear if it were you." That got me thinking. The next few days were a mix of dreaming and planning. I found myself drifting off during history class, staring at the laminated map of the world, imagining what it would feel like if she said yes. Would we slow dance to Kiss from a Rose? Would we match outfits, maybe her wearing a silver dress and me with a silver tie? Would we laugh nervously in the photo booth, those cheap plastic frames they'd hand out afterward with the date and theme written in cursive? Have you ever built something up so much in your mind that you almost convinced yourself it had already happened? That's how it was for me. I had played the moment over in my head so many times that I forgot she didn't even know yet. I imagined her reaction, her surprise, maybe even a shy yes followed by a laugh. I imagined the little glimmer in her eyes when she read the message, no matter how I decided to deliver it. But how do you ask someone in a way they'll remember forever? That was the real question. I didn't want it to be forgettable. I didn't want it to be something she'd lump in with the rest. That's when the idea came. I'd write a note and slide it into the sleeve of a rented VHS. 10 Things I Hate About You. She loved that movie. I'd rent it from StarTime Video, not Blockbuster, because StarTime still had that faint smell of popcorn and carpet cleaner, and the guy behind the counter would let me drop things off after closing time if I needed to. I knew her brother worked weekends there. I'd ask him to leave the note inside the case before she picked it up. Simple, private, a little romantic. Totally 90s. I spent the night before writing that note over and over again. I wanted it to feel like me, but braver. I wanted it to say, "I like you," without sounding desperate. In the end, I just wrote, "I heard you liked this movie. Thought maybe you'd want to make a memory of your own." Prom? It wasn't poetry, but it was honest. I folded it carefully and placed it inside the case, right between the flap and the tape itself. I still remember the weight of that plastic case in my hand, the soft clack it made when it closed. I handed it to her brother, who just smirked knowingly and gave me a silent thumbs up. Then came the waiting. 2 days, 48 hours. That felt like a lifetime. Every ring of the phone made my stomach twist. Every knock at the door made my heart race. Did she find it? Did she watch the movie right away? Did she laugh? Was she confused? Have you ever been so anxious you couldn't eat, even when your mom made your favorite hamburger helper? That was me. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring the same cold bite over and over while Boy Meets World played in the background. I wanted time to speed up and slow down all at once. And then she called. I remember how quiet it was right after I hung up the phone. My hands were still wrapped around the receiver, the long curly cord tangled around my fingers, as if letting go might break the spell. Her voice had been softer than I expected, not because she was shy, but because we were both holding something delicate between us. She said yes. She said it like it had been waiting there all along, tucked between the scenes of everything we'd never said out loud. And after I hung up, I sat back on my bed, the old mattress springs creaking beneath me, and let the silence bloom into something warm. I must have stared at the ceiling for a full hour, watching the slow turn of the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck there years before. But before that moment, before she said yes, and before the world tilted in that subtle, beautiful way, I had lived entirely in my imagination, in the movies. You know the kind I mean. The ones that played on Saturday afternoons on cable, or late at night when everyone else was asleep and the world felt a little more yours. Movies where prom was always the crescendo, the big moment when the underdog got the girl or the girl realized she'd had the power all along. Back then, we didn't just watch those movies. We lived in them, rewound them, studied them like maps to a future we couldn't wait to reach. Things I Hate About You wasn't just a film. It was a feeling, a language. I watched it 3 times in the week before prom. I'd lie on the floor with a bowl of microwave popcorn, the kind with that fake butter smell that lingered for days and let the dialogue seep into me. There was something about the way Patrick looked at Kat, like he saw all the walls she had built and still wanted to know what was behind them. I found myself wondering, would someone ever look at me that way? Or better, could I look at someone like that, with that kind of intention, that quiet confidence? And then there was She's All That. That movie was everywhere. You couldn't go a day without someone at school quoting it or trying to mimic the big makeover reveal scene, laughing as they pushed their glasses up or let their hair fall dramatically. But beneath all the jokes, there was this unspoken truth. We were all waiting for someone to notice us, to see past whatever masks we wore and realize that maybe, just maybe, there was something beautiful underneath. I used to imagine walking down those prom stairs too, not in a tuxedo, not even in some dramatic moment, just present, seen. Have you ever imagined something so vividly that it felt more real than your own reflection? That was me, night after night, lying there with the TV screen flickering blue shadows across my walls, pretending the sound of my box fan was applause as I stepped into my own imagined prom. Sometimes I pictured her there, waiting for me near the bleachers in the gym, wearing a dress the color of twilight, her hair curled like in those herbal essences commercials. Other nights, I wasn't even in the picture. I was just watching her laugh, seeing her being happy, as if that alone could be enough. There's a certain magic in those teenage movies. They made you believe that anything could happen under string lights and paper stars, that a single night could change everything. Even though I knew, deep down, that real life was never as tidy, I still let myself believe. I think we all did. Because at 16, what else do you have but hope, awkward courage, and an endless loop of romantic comedies recorded on a worn-out VHS? I used to tape them off TV. I'd wait for the exact moment the commercials ended, hovering over the record button, trying not to get that blurry transition where the network logo faded into the movie title. I labeled each tape carefully. Prom Dreams Volume 1, Movie Moments to Remember, Future Nights. I never told anyone I did that. It felt too personal, too sacred. Like saying it out loud might break the spell. Sometimes I'd call her in the evenings. Not to say anything important, just to hear her voice. We'd talk about school or what bands we were into lately. She liked the Cranberries, and I pretended to like them too, even though I only knew Linger. One night she mentioned that her favorite scene in 10 Things I Hate About You was when Patrick sang to Kat in front of the whole stadium. "It's bold," she said, "but sweet." And I remember thinking, maybe I don't have to be as bold as singing in public, but I could still try to be sweet. I could still try to be seen. I practiced dancing alone in my room, not actual moves, just the way I'd sway if a slow song came on. I'd imagine her leaning into me, our arms slightly awkward but slowly learning the rhythm of each other. I worried about sweating through my shirt, about stepping on her feet, about whether I should wear cologne or not. It was strange how something as simple as dancing could become the biggest unknown of your world. Like walking on the moon with dress shoes. Do you remember what it was like to believe that one night could mean everything? That if you just got the moment right, everything else would fall into place? There was this one evening when I went to the video store, not for anything specific, just to wander the aisles. The carpet was worn thin near the new releases, and the lights above the teen favorites shelf flickered slightly. I ran my fingers along the plastic cases, reading the backs like they were instructions for happiness. Each movie promised something: transformation, redemption, love. I stood there with Can't Hardly Wait in one hand and Drive Me Crazy in the other, wondering which one might teach me something new about how to make prom unforgettable. That night, I watched both, back to back. I sat there on my beanbag chair, eating fruit gushers, letting the sugar stick to my fingers, dreaming about my moment. The moment I'd walk in and everything would slow down, the music fading into something soft and cinematic, her eyes finding mine across the room. Of course, real life never follows a script, but what those movies gave me, and maybe gave all of us, was permission to hope. to imagine, to believe that under the right lights, with the right music, we could all be seen as someone worth saying yes to. So after all those nights spent living inside the glow of teenage love stories, I was finally stepping into one of my own. My name wouldn't roll across the screen in opening credits, and no one would be there to play the closing song, but it would be mine. Our own little prom story, wrapped in the quiet courage of a rented VHS and the soft yes of a girl who didn't need fanfare to say she'd go with me. What happened next wasn't like the movies, it was better. It was a Saturday morning when my mom tapped lightly on the door frame, holding her purse in one hand and her keys in the other, smiling in that quiet way that meant she'd been thinking about this moment long before I had. "You ready?" she asked. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, still half listening to a Counting Crows cassette spinning softly in the background. My room smelled faintly of wood from the old dresser and a little like my dad's aftershave, which I had secretly started borrowing. The calendar on my wall had a bright red circle around the date of the prom, and it suddenly felt closer than ever. There's something about getting dressed for prom that makes it feel real. All the late-night movies and whispered phone calls were just warm-up acts for this. I hadn't realized until then how much choosing a suit, not just any suit, but the suit, would mean. It wasn't about looking cool, not really. It was about becoming someone who could walk across the gym floor under the glow of disco lights and feel like he belonged there. Someone who didn't just hope to be noticed, but was. As we pulled into the mall parking lot, the sky was overcast, in that soft, cozy way that only Saturday mornings in the 90s could be. I remember the sound of the blinker ticking while we waited for a spot, and how my mom hummed along to the radio as "Kiss Me" by Sixpence. None the Richer played on the FM station. There were kids everywhere, some around my age, some older, all moving in and out of stores with big department bags in hand. There was this buzz in the air, like everyone knew something important was coming. Have you ever felt the weight of a decision in something as simple as what color tie to wear? We walked into Dillard's first. The lights were too bright at the entrance, and the mannequins stood tall in awkward poses, wearing stiff jackets that looked too clean to ever feel natural. My mom made a beeline for the formal wear section, like she had rehearsed this path 100 times before. I followed her, tugging slightly at my flannel shirt, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked among the rows of pressed white collars and silk ties. "Let's start with something classic," she said, pulling a navy jacket from the rack. I held it up to myself in front of the mirror. It looked fine, but it didn't feel like me. We tried gray, then black, then a maroon that made my face look pale. My dad, who had joined us halfway through, kept leaning in from the chairs near the fitting room with a quiet thumbs up or the occasional "that one's sharp." We all laughed when I tried on a tuxedo with tails. I looked like a magician's assistant, and not in a good way. But somewhere between all the wrong ones, I found it. The suit that made me stand still for a second longer in front of the mirror. It was charcoal, not quite black, with a soft texture that caught the light just enough. I rolled my shoulders in it, adjusted the lapels, and met my mom's eyes through the reflection. "You like it?" she asked gently. I nodded, and just like that we knew. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was me, or at least the version of me I wanted to show her. Not my mom, though I think she saw him too. Her, the girl I'd asked, the one who said yes, the one I'd been dreaming of in slow dance montages and imagined camera pans. My dad stepped forward with a quiet grin. He adjusted the tie slightly, checked the cuffs like he was teaching me some silent lesson about how to carry yourself. "You clean up well, kid." It meant the world, coming from him. Do you remember how it felt to stand in front of those dressing room mirrors under buzzing fluorescent lights, hoping that the reflection would feel like the person you were becoming? Later, as we walked through the rest of the mall, the echoes of pop music bounced off tile floors, and the scent of Auntie Anne's pretzels lingered in the air. We passed by Claire's, where a group of girls were laughing over hair clips and fake pearl chokers. One of them was holding a magazine open to a page that showed the top 10 prom looks of the year. I slowed down without meaning to, curious. My mom noticed and smiled. "Worried about her dress?" she asked softly. I shrugged. Maybe I was. Maybe I just wanted to make sure we'd match. Maybe I just wanted to make sure she'd feel as magical as I hoped to feel next to her. That afternoon, I passed by a row of display windows. One in particular stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't flashy, but there was a mannequin wearing a pale blue dress that shimmered slightly. I wondered, without knowing why, if she might choose that color. It seemed like her. Soft but memorable. The kind of color that stuck in your mind long after the moment passed. That night at dinner, my mom told my dad how proud she was. Not just because I looked good in a suit, but because I had thought about it. Chosen carefully. Taken the time. That was the thing about the 90s. We waited for moments. We didn't scroll through dozens of options or have things shipped in overnight. We went to the store, we tried things on, we looked in mirrors with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and made decisions with our hands. Have you ever missed the feeling of walking through a mall with your parents, knowing the day was about more than just clothes? It wasn't just about the suit, it was about spending time together, about my mom fixing my collar, my dad adjusting my sleeves, about the soft silence in the car ride home, interrupted only by the radio and the occasional question about the playlist I wanted for the big night. It was about the anticipation that sat gently in the chest, not rushed, not forced, just waiting. When we got home, I hung the suit carefully in my closet, right next to a box of cassette tapes and an old denim jacket. I stared at it for a while, imagining how it would look under the gym lights next to her. I imagined what her dress might look like, whether we'd laugh when we saw each other, surprised at how grown up we seemed. Maybe we'd even take one of those awkward prom pictures with the cheesy backdrop and fake columns. Maybe, just maybe, it would be the kind of night that would stay with us for years. And even though I knew we were still a little ways off, I could feel it coming closer. That dance, that song, that slow moment where time would stretch out like the last note of a perfect track. A moment stitched together from movie scenes, whispered dreams, and the soft, steady heartbeat of real life. It's strange how time changes speed when you're waiting for something. The week before prom felt like stepping into a different atmosphere, where hours stretched and then collapsed without warning. Everything that used to feel ordinary, brushing my teeth, tying my shoes, walking the halls at school, started to feel heavy with some kind of significance I couldn't quite explain. The closer the night got, the more aware I became of every second ticking by. On Monday morning, I woke up early, even though I'd barely slept. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours before the alarm even buzzed. My thoughts were racing, in circles and mostly about her. Would she still want to go? Would we look okay together? What if she changed her mind? What if she got sick? What if I got sick? What if the power went out in the middle of the dance and the music stopped and I just stood there with no idea what to do? Anxiety doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, soft and persistent, wrapping itself around your ribs like a slow tightening band. By lunchtime, everything felt louder. My friends were tossing fries and joking around like it was just another week, but there was an electric undercurrent to everything. I noticed more glances, more hushed conversations that ended in laughter, more people flipping through folded pieces of paper that looked suspiciously like prom checklists. Even teachers had this energy in their voices, like they remembered what this week once meant to them, years ago. I saw her walking down the hallway that day, and for a second, everything else went blurry. She wasn't even wearing anything special. Jeans, a loose sweatshirt, her hair pulled back. But something about her smile, the way she held her books close to her chest, made it feel like the universe paused for a breath. She caught me, looking, and instead of pretending I wasn't, I smiled. She smiled back. Nothing said, nothing needed. Do you remember what it felt like to float through the days leading up to something you both feared and craved? Tuesday was worse. It was the kind of day where even your reflection doesn't look convinced. I tried on my suit again in the mirror, just to be sure it still fit. It did, but suddenly the tie looked too plain. The shirt felt too crisp. I tried to picture her standing next to me, but the image kept shifting like static on a TV screen. I called my best friend that night and asked him if he was nervous too. He laughed. "Of course I am," he said. "I'm sweating through my socks just thinking about the first dance." We ended up talking for over an hour, mostly joking about who was going to trip first and whether the punch would be spiked. Still, underneath the jokes, I could hear it. That same weight, that same fluttering tension that wrapped itself around every breath. By Wednesday, the dreams started. Not nightmares exactly. Just strange, fuzzy dreams where I'd show up to prom without shoes or forget where I'd left my date. One dream had me spinning on the dance floor under a disco ball that turned into a clock, its hands ticking faster and faster until everything went black. I'd wake up covered in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd just run laps. At school, there were whispered lists of songs people hoped the DJ would play. Rumors of surprise limos and secret after-parties spread like wildfire. The girls in the hallway were suddenly all about glitter hairspray and last-minute manicure appointments. The guys were quieter, a little more reserved, but the energy was there. Everyone was pretending to be fine, but we were all walking on air and eggshells at the same time. My mom noticed I wasn't eating much. "Nerves?" she asked gently. I nodded, not needing to explain. She handed me a small bottle of cologne and said, "Just a dab. It's the one your dad wore to our first big date." I held it in my hand like it was fragile, sacred. It smelled like pine and soft leather and something I couldn't name but felt deeply. That night, my dad found me sitting on the porch. He sat beside me without saying anything for a while. Then he said, "Prom isn't just about one night. It's about all the little moments that lead up to it. It's about the waiting, the hoping, the imagining. That's what makes it stick with you." I didn't answer, but I felt the truth of it settle into my chest like a quiet flame. By Thursday, the school was buzzing louder than ever. Decorations were going up in the gym. Someone said they saw the committee hanging fairy lights and blowing up silver balloons. Every hallway felt like it was hiding a secret. The principal even made an announcement about making good choices and being safe that made everyone snicker. But deep down, I think we all understood the importance of the moment. This wasn't just a dance, it was the dance. And me, I was counting hours. The butterflies in my stomach had upgraded to hawks. My palms were constantly sweaty. I kept checking my watch, checking my bag, checking my notes, even though I didn't have anything I needed to study for. My mind refused to focus on anything except what was coming. The outfit hanging in my closet, the flowers my mom had helped me order, the moment I'd see her walk through the door, and whether I'd remember how to breathe. On Friday morning, the last school day before the big event, everything felt surreal. The sky looked brighter than usual. The air smelled like spring, and even though nothing extraordinary had happened yet, I could feel it. The anticipation humming underneath my skin like the intro of a favorite song that was just about to drop. She passed by me in the hall again. This time she stopped. "Are you ready?" she asked with a soft grin. I nodded. "As I'll ever be." She smiled and said, "Me too," before walking away. I watched her go, heart pounding in that slow, echoing way, like a distant drum roll. The weekend had finally arrived. One night left. One final sleep. Have you ever had a night before the night? The kind where every second stretches and every small sound seems louder, every thought heavier, until you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow will feel as magical as you've imagined. And if it does, will you be ready for it? The morning of prom arrived with the weight of 1,000 expectations. I woke up before the sun, not out of discipline or routine, but because sleep had long since abandoned me. My chest was filled with that unbearable pressure that lives somewhere, between dread and anticipation. It was hard to tell if I was more afraid she wouldn't show up, or that she would, and I wouldn't know how to act. The day dragged like a slow song. Every moment felt like it had to mean something. I wandered the house aimlessly, checking my suit again, watching the clock, sipping water I didn't really want. My mom tried to talk to me over breakfast, but I couldn't concentrate on anything beyond my own silent hoping. I kept glancing out the window like some sign would appear, a change in the wind, a spark in the sky, anything to make this day feel real and not imagined. By noon, my dad offered to take me out for a quick drive. "Just to calm your nerves," he said. I didn't argue. We drove with the windows down, the spring air rushing through the car, carrying the scent of budding flowers and cut grass. He didn't say much, just tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of a quiet song playing on the radio. I appreciated the silence. It gave me space to wrestle with the millions of thoughts storming in my head. Would she be there? That one question, played on loop, like a record skipping again and again. I'd like to say I was confident that her smile in the hallway or her quiet "me too" had been enough. But hope is a delicate thing. It lifts you and haunts you all at once. I held on to it with shaky fingers, praying it wouldn't dissolve before the night even began. The hours crept forward. Shower, hair, double-check the boutonniere, triple-check the tie. Rehearse the words I'd say when I saw her. Forget them. Rehearse again. My heart refused to slow. My breathing came in waves, shallow, then deep, then shallow again. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like someone going to prom. It looked like a kid playing dress-up, pretending to be part of a scene from one of those teen movies I used to love. Then, somehow, it was time. The sun had just started to set as we pulled up to the school. There were already people gathered. Outside the gym, girls in shimmering dresses, guys in sharp suits or slightly wrinkled shirts, groups laughing, taking pictures under strings of warm lights. The world had softened into that golden hour glow, where everything feels just a little more beautiful and just a little more fragile. I stepped out of the car, legs stiff with nerves. My parents waved from a distance, cameras in hand, but I barely saw them. My eyes were searching, scanning, waiting. Was she here yet? I pretended not to look too hard. I greeted friends, nodded at classmates, even managed a few awkward laughs. But my mind was elsewhere. She was all I could think about. Would she be wearing blue like she'd hinted? Would she have done something different with her hair? Would she even show? Inside, the gym had transformed. What had once been a place of sweaty basketball games and echoing announcements was now lit with soft twinkle lights and sheer fabric draped across the ceiling. There was a makeshift dance floor, a DJ booth, tables with tiny LED candles flickering, gently. The music had already begun, something upbeat and familiar, but I barely heard it. All my senses were tuned to one frequency, her. Then I saw her. She stepped into the room like she wasn't sure she belonged, like she was trying to blend in but couldn't possibly go unnoticed. She was wearing a long dress, not blue but something softer, like the color of a quiet sky before rain. Her hair framed her face in waves, and her eyes scanned the crowd with the same searching look I imagined was in mine. I froze. I didn't go to her. Not right away. I watched from across the room, feet rooted to the ground like the wrong move might break the spell. She looked radiant in the most human way. Not like someone in a movie, but like someone who carried her light without realizing it. People greeted her and she smiled. She laughed at something, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a brief second looked right at me. Did she see me? Did she notice? I looked away too quickly, heart hammering, palms sweaty. I knew I had to move, say something, but my body wasn't cooperating. Instead, I hovered, danced around the idea of her, from one table to another, one conversation to the next, always with one eye on where she stood. Each time our gazes met, even for a moment, something electric passed between us, or maybe it was just in my mind. That's the thing about hope. It blurs the line between reality and longing. At one point, I walked to the refreshment table just as she did. We reached for the same cup. Our fingers brushed. She looked at me and smiled. "Hey," she said, softly. "Hey," I replied, breath catching in my throat. "You clean up nice," she added, and just like that, the tension in my chest melted a little. I smiled finally. "So do you," I managed to say. "I was hoping you'd be here." Her smile deepened. "I was hoping you would be." That moment hung in the air like a held note. Not too long, not too short, just enough to feel real. We didn't rush to the dance floor. We stayed by the table, talking, laughing about the awkward moments of the week, the weirdness of feeling so grown up and so unsure at the same time. She confessed she had almost changed her mind that morning. I admitted I had practiced to say at least a dozen times. Somehow, that vulnerability made everything easier, and when the slow song finally came on, one of those nostalgic ballads that would probably sound cheesy on any other day, she looked at me. "Want to dance?" she asked. I didn't need to rehearse the answer. As we stepped onto the floor, surrounded by swaying bodies and blinking lights, I realized that all the watching, all the waiting, all the silent hoping had led to this. Not a movie moment, not a picture-perfect scene, but something quieter, deeper, more real. She was here, I was here, and we had both noticed, and maybe that was enough. The moment we stepped onto the dance floor, it was as if the world softened around us. The music was slow, deliberate, the kind of song that didn't demand attention but offered space for moments to unfold. All around us, classmates moved carefully, swaying in rhythm, laughing in hushed tones, holding hands as though they finally had permission to let their guard down. And somehow I was right there in it, no longer an outsider watching from the edges, but inside the scene itself, part of the atmosphere. For a second, I forgot about everything that had led to this point. The anxious planning, the long afternoons of wondering, the clumsy rehearsals in my mind. All of it faded as her hand rested gently in mine. The warmth of her palm against my fingers, the soft rhythm of our steps, the occasional glance up to meet her eyes, these things grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. It didn't feel like I was at some overhyped high school dance anymore. It felt like I'd walked into a dream, and for once I wasn't just watching, I belonged in it. The gym had been transformed into something magical. The overhead lights had been dimmed, replaced by a cascade of fairy lights strung like stars from the ceiling. Golden balloons floated in clusters, catching the light and reflecting soft hues across the room. The tables were draped in white and gold linen, tiny, candles flickering at the center of each. The air was tinged with a sweet, faintly citrus scent from the punch, and the music echoed slightly against the old walls, giving it a distant, cinematic feel. I caught sight of some of my classmates, people I'd known for years but had barely spoken to outside of shared classes or awkward group projects, and they looked different tonight. Not just because of the clothes or the hair, but because everyone seemed to be shedding something invisible. The usual high school hierarchy, the labels and roles we played to survive the day-to-day, were gone. In their place were genuine smiles, nervous laughter, and the rare kind of vulnerability that only comes when people know it's a one-night-only performance. She twirled once under the lights, not because the song called for it, but just to be playful. And her laughter rang, out so clearly it seemed to echo above the music. I laughed too, not because anything was funny, but because I couldn't help it. That kind of joy was contagious. Her dress caught the golden shimmer from the ceiling and moved like water around her legs. She reached for my hands again, and I pulled her gently closer, wondering if she could feel my heartbeat trying to escape my chest. "Everything feels unreal," I whispered, more to myself than to her. She nodded, a small smile on her lips. "Like we're inside one of those movies we used to talk about in English class." "Exactly," I said, "only better." We danced without worrying about who was watching. In fact, I barely noticed anyone else until we took a break and wandered toward the refreshment table again. From the edge of the room, I looked back at the dance floor. It was like watching a scene unfold on a screen. The dim lighting, the golden glow, the couples swaying with slightly mismatched steps but synchronized hearts. It was all too perfectly imperfect. A guy in a burgundy suit spun his date in a movie far too advanced for the setting, but they both laughed so hard afterward it didn't matter. Another couple, clearly nervous, stood near the edge of the room, hands brushing now and then as they waited for the courage to ask each other to dance. Even the teachers chaperoning had softened expressions, smiling as they watched this small miracle of adolescent romance and fleeting freedom play out. There was something deeply beautiful about seeing everyone like this. Stripped of sarcasm and swagger, people showed up as their gentler selves. The girl who always sat at the back of class with headphones on had her hair curled and a sparkling dress that shimmered with every step. The boy known for cracking jokes during presentations was now slow dancing with someone, his face uncharacteristically tender. It was as if this night gave permission for everyone to stop pretending and simply feel something, even if just for a few hours. We found a small table near the back where we could sit and watch without being pulled back into conversation. She leaned in close, her head resting against my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too loudly, afraid to disturb the peace that had found us. "Do you think we'll remember this night?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "Not just because it's prom, but because it feels like a scene I never want to forget." She smiled at that. Not a big grin, just a soft, knowing curve of her lips that seemed to say, "Me too." Later in the night, a photographer began moving around the room, capturing candid shots between couples, friends, solo moments against a glittery backdrop. When it was our turn, we stood side by side, and I realized I didn't need to force a smile. It was, already there, lingering naturally. The camera clicked, a moment frozen in time. I didn't need to see the photo to know it would matter. Not because we looked perfect, but because we felt something real when it was taken. As the night wore on, the tempo of the music picked up and groups of friends gathered in circles to dance to familiar pop songs that everyone pretended to hate, but secretly loved. I let myself join in, even if my moves were awkward, even if I wasn't sure where to put my hands or when to jump. She danced beside me, eyes lit up, hands in the air, like she was letting go of everything that had weighed her down all year. And I followed her lead. That was the magic of it. This wasn't about who had the best outfit or who danced best. It wasn't about who kissed who under the golden balloon arch or which couple left early holding hands. It was about the feeling that, just for tonight, we were part of something bigger. We had stepped into a memory we'd carry long after the decorations were torn down and the dresses folded away. A memory made of shared laughter, blurry photos, late-night confessions, and the kind of hope that only really exists when you're 17 and the world hasn't yet asked you to grow up. By the time the DJ announced the last song, the gym was quieter, calmer. People clung a little tighter, knowing this would soon be over. The music slowed again, one final chance to live inside the story we'd written for ourselves tonight. I held her close, her head resting against my chest now, our breathing finding a rhythm as the melody filled the space around us. "I don't want this night to end," I said without thinking. She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "Then, don't let it." I didn't know what that meant yet, what came next, or how we'd hold on to this after the lights came up. But for now, I didn't need to. This was enough. We were enough. The movie scene was real, and I was lucky enough to be inside it. Just when it felt like the night had reached its emotional peak, the DJ spoke into the mic again, his voice calm, almost reverent, as he introduced the final slow song of the evening. It wasn't a grand anthem or a popular chart topper. It was one of those timeless ballads that felt out of place on playlists, but perfect in moments like this. The kind of song that made people stop talking mid-sentence, made even the most distracted look up, made hearts open wide. The opening chords floated gently across the gym, delicate and familiar, like the soundtrack of a memory you hadn't lived yet. I felt it immediately, the shift. Like the whole room inhaled and forgot to exhale. Voices faded, movements slowed. Every pair of eyes looked toward someone they hoped would look back. And I knew, without needing to think, that this was the moment. That one song. The window that only opens once, when all your nerves and dreams stand still, just long enough to ask, are you going to take the chance? Or are you going to let it pass? I turned to her. She was already looking at me. She wasn't smiling, not yet. There was something else on her face. A question, a challenge, a hope. And in that instant, I understood. She felt it too. The song wasn't just music. It was a call. A door cracked open, waiting for one of us to step through. I took her hand, Again, gently, slowly, like we hadn't already danced a dozen times that night. But this time was different. There was a kind of sacred silence now, a hush that blanketed everything. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We walked back onto the dance floor, moving past the clusters of classmates, some still chattering, others already wrapped in arms that trembled slightly with nerves. She looked down once, then back at me, and we stopped right in the center of the room. The first lyrics unfolded, soft and longing, the kind of words that made the space between us shrink without effort. We moved closer, not rushed, just drawn together by something neither of us could name. My hands found her waist, hers rested gently on my shoulders, and then we were dancing again, but not like before. This wasn't about fun, it wasn't about performance, it wasn't even about being seen. It was about the possibility that had lingered between us all year long finally taking shape. Her eyes searched mine, and for a long second I couldn't breathe. I felt 17 and ancient all at once. Like this one song had gathered every unspoken thing between us and offered it up in a 3-minute miracle. The lyrics seemed to mirror everything I was too afraid to say aloud, about wanting to be seen, about hoping to matter, about finding courage in the rhythm of another person's heartbeat. Around us, other couples leaned in close, some swaying, others whispering. I didn't hear any of it, just the music and her breath, and the question in the air. Was I going to risk everything and say what I really felt? I've wanted to do this for a long time, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze softened. So why didn't you? I don't know. I guess. I thought maybe you didn't feel the same. Her laugh was soft and sad, like she understood too well. Isn't that always the reason? We kept moving, slower than the music even asked. 4. I felt like I was drifting, like we were dancing underwater, suspended in something weightless and fragile. Every second ticked louder now, not on a clock, but in my chest. I didn't want the song to end. I knew what would come after. The lights brightening, the illusion breaking, the return to normal life. So I said it, because it was now or never. Like you, more than just prom, more than just tonight. Her hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. She didn't speak right away, and in that quiet pause, I felt the world tilt slightly, not in fear, but in hope. She looked up. I was hoping you'd say that. My heart didn't leap. It settled, like it had been waiting for this moment to stop racing. I smiled, and she smiled back, and the distance that had always existed, the maybe, the almost, the what if, dissolved like it had never been there. The song kept playing, but time stopped caring. We were still dancing when it reached the bridge, that part where the music lifts just a little, the singer's voice filled with something raw and open. She rested her head against my chest, and I closed my eyes. I don't know what anyone else was doing. I didn't care. All I knew was that I was holding the girl I liked, and she liked me back, and the music had given us a reason to finally say it. When the last note played, the room remained still for a beat. No one clapped, no one cheered. It wasn't that kind of song. It ended gently, quietly, like a breath exhaled after holding it too long. And in that silence, we looked at each other again. There were no grand declarations, no kiss in front of a crowd, just the simple, unshakable knowledge that something had shifted, something real had begun. Walk me out? She asked. Of course. We left the gym slowly, hand in hand, slipping past the balloon arch and into the cool night air. The stars were out. The parking lot buzzed with people talking, laughing, saying their goodbyes. But we kept walking, past the cars, past the edge of campus, to the quiet sidewalk that led toward the street. The world felt bigger out here, less scripted, more ours. We didn't need more words. That one song had said enough for both of us. It had opened a door and we had stepped through, together, and for the first time all night, I wasn't nervous anymore. I wish I could say that everything got easier after that slow dance. That once we walked out of the gym together, once I confessed how I felt and she met me in that quiet, terrifying space of vulnerability, the nerves vanished and confidence took over. But the truth is, real feelings are never that simple. They deepen, they grow, and sometimes they intensify the fear rather than erase it. The next day, I kept replaying it all in my head, her hand in mine, her words, the softness in her eyes. I'd gone to prom thinking I would blend into the background, hoping for a flicker of attention, maybe one slow dance if the universe was feeling generous. But what happened was more than I expected, more than I knew how to carry. And suddenly, there was this new pressure, not from her, but from within me, to not mess it up. To be the version of myself I'd shown her for 3 minutes under. Glittering lights and echoing music. To keep whatever magic had happened alive once the music stopped. We texted the next morning, just a simple exchange. Good morning, did you sleep well? Last night felt like a dream. That kind of thing. But under every message was this nervous energy, like we were both walking on the edge of something fragile and beautiful. So when the school announced there would be one last dance held in the auditorium, a casual follow-up to prom for those who hadn't gotten their full moment, I felt it again. That same nervous flutter in my stomach, the same tightness in my chest. One more night, one more chance, and this time the stakes felt even higher. I spent the entire day thinking about it, not just what I'd wear or whether she'd be there, but something deeper. Would I have the courage to walk across the dance floor again, knowing what I knew now? Not just hoping she'd notice me, but walking toward her with intention, with purpose, with the full knowledge of what it meant to choose someone openly. The evening came quicker than expected. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk as I made my way to the auditorium. This time the mood was more relaxed. No tuxes or ball gowns, just regular clothes. But somehow the absence of glamour made everything feel more intimate, more exposed. Inside, the lights were lower, not as theatrical as prom, but warm and golden. Strings of fairy lights hung across the ceiling, and the smell of popcorn lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the distant beat of music already playing. People were dancing in loose circles, laughing, relaxed. But my eyes were scanning for her. And when I saw her, near the back of the room, standing beside a group of friends with a red cup in her hand and that familiar look of quiet observation, my breath caught. I wanted to go to her immediately. But my feet didn't move. My palms were sweating. My heart was hammering so loudly in my chest I was sure everyone could hear it. All the noise around me blurred. It was just her, and the distance between us, and the thousands of fears crowding my mind. What if she didn't want to dance again? What if she regretted what happened at prom? What if I had imagined all of it, and then the DJ slowed the music, announced a song that wasn't quite a slow dance, but close enough. Something soft and rhythmic, the kind of beat that could carry 1,000 possibilities. My throat was dry, my pulse throbbed in my neck, but I knew this was the moment. The same question again. Would I go? Would I risk it? I took one breath, then a step, then another. Each movement felt like pushing through thick air. The distance between us might as well have been a mile. Every time someone turned or walked by or shifted in their spot, I imagined her seeing someone else and walking away. But she didn't. She was still there, still holding that red cup, still watching the room like she was waiting for something. My hands were damp. I wiped them discreetly on the sides of my jeans, wishing I could slow my heart or calm the nervous tremble in my fingers. I kept moving, slow and steady, as the music surrounded us in waves. My eyes never left her. And when she finally noticed me, really saw me walking toward her, something softened in her expression. She didn't look away. She smiled. That smile was the only encouragement I needed. By the time I reached her, the dance floor was full again, but all I saw was her. "Hey," I said, almost too quietly. "Hey," she replied, setting her cup down. I was hoping you'd come. I was hoping you'd be here. We stood there for a second, the space between us charged with memory and unspoken questions. Then she held out her hand. No words, just the gesture. I took it, and that first step back onto the dance floor was harder than any walk I'd ever made. Not because of the eyes I imagined watching, not because of fear of rejection, but because it meant something now. Every movement toward her was a declaration. Every step said, I choose you. Still, again, on purpose. The song enveloped us as we moved, closer this time, more certain. I could feel her heartbeat through the fabric of her shirt as we danced. Or maybe it was mine. Maybe it was both. We didn't talk much, just looked at each other, just held on. At some point, I whispered, I was terrified to walk over here. Her lips curved into a knowing grin. Me too, but I'm glad you did. The song faded, but we didn't let go right away. We stood in the center of the room, surrounded by other stories, other couples, other dances. But for us, it was a beginning. A moment that proved that fear didn't always win. That sometimes walking across a crowded room with your heart in your hands is exactly what changes everything. And as we left the dance floor, fingers still intertwined, I realized something. Every great story has a moment like that. A point where the character decides to move forward despite the fear. This was mine, and I had taken it. We didn't go far after the song ended. Just a few steps toward the edge of the dance floor, still holding hands, both of us quiet in that way people are when they're trying to hold on to a feeling without saying too much. The music kept playing, another song starting in the background. Not quite as slow, not quite as dramatic, but it didn't matter. We weren't listening to the beat as much as we were listening to the moment, letting it unfold one heartbeat at a time. It was hard to explain how different everything felt, even though nothing on the outside had really changed. We were still two kids in a crowded auditorium, surrounded by classmates and the hum of conversations and laughter. But in our little bubble, it felt like a shift had happened. The kind you don't always notice in real time. Only later, when you look back and realize you were right on the edge of something bigger than you knew. She looked at me and tilted her head slightly, that small smile playing on her lips again. Want to dance again? She asked, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it over the music. I nodded, even though my brain was screaming about how awkward I was, about how I never really learned how to dance, especially not with someone I actually liked. But I didn't care. Not now. I followed her back toward the center of the floor where the light was dimmer, a few string bulbs blinking like stars overhead. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a movie scene. But it felt like magic anyway. We faced each other, both a little unsure, both smiling like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, but too curious to back away. I placed my hands lightly on her waist, and she rested hers on my shoulders, her fingers curling just slightly into the fabric of my shirt. We started moving, or at least trying to. It was a shuffle at first. Not quite a rhythm, just two nervous sets of feet trying to find a common tempo. We bumped into each other more than once. I stepped on her foot and she accidentally pulled me off balance and we both laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind. I'm not exactly good at this, I admitted. Good, she said, grinning. Neither am I. That helped. That leveled the ground beneath us. There was no pressure to perform, to impress. Only the shared awkwardness of two people figuring it out together. The way her eyes sparkled when she laughed made me forget every worry I had. We weren't perfect dancers, but we were present, and that meant more. Around us, the room spun slowly, the lights casting a soft glow that made everything feel warmer. Shadows moved gently along the walls. Some people danced with confidence, twirling and spinning like they'd practiced all their lives. Others stood near the snack tables or against the walls, chatting or watching. But we were in our own little rhythm now, simple as it was, and every moment felt suspended in something delicate and real. The music slowed again. A new song, quieter. The kind of tune you don't even notice at first, but that sinks into you if you let it. Our feet moved in small circles, almost in place. I could feel the way she breathed. I didn't know where to look, her eyes or the space just past her shoulder. So I did both, switching when one felt too intense. She rested her head lightly against my chest, just for a second. And that second lasted forever. I feel like this is one of those moments, she whispered. What kind? The kind you remember, even when you don't try to. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just held her a little tighter, careful not to make it weird, but enough to let her know I understood, that I agreed. That I was right there with her, feeling every second slip into memory like a Polaroid developing in slow motion. At one point, we stopped moving completely, just stood there swaying, as if dancing was less about the steps and more about the nearness, the quiet recognition of something tender growing between us. I wasn't sure if anyone was watching. I didn't care. All that mattered was that she hadn't let go, that neither of us had tried to run from the awkwardness, that we had allowed the clumsiness to be part of the beauty. Eventually, the song faded. Another beat took its place, something faster. People cheered. Some started jumping up and down or waving their arms, welcoming the shift in energy. But we stayed still a little longer, as if waiting for some internal permission to rejoin the rest of the world. She finally pulled back and looked up at me, smiling again. That wasn't so bad, she said. No, I answered, smiling back. It really wasn't. We didn't rush off the dance floor. We just stepped aside and stood close, watching the chaos return around us. She leaned slightly into me, our arms brushing, and I could still feel the warmth of where her hand had rested just moments before. Everything inside me buzzed with nervous energy and quiet joy. The night wasn't over. Not yet. But in that moment, it didn't matter what came next. Because we'd had this, our awkward, wonderful, unforgettable slow dance under dim lights, and it was enough to change something inside me. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be real, and it was. The gymnasium lights didn't fully come on until the last song had played and the final chords drifted away into applause and a few playful whistles. Slowly, the magic began to dissolve, but not all at once. Like mist rising after a summer rain, it lingered for a while in the space between goodbye hugs, group photos, and the slow shuffle of tired feet reluctantly heading toward the doors. Everything inside me wanted to stretch the night a little longer, even just another 5 minutes. But I knew we were reaching the end of something we'd never be able to repeat. She stood beside me, hugging her arms, a small cardigan now pulled over her shoulders. Her hair was a little frizzy from the dancing, and the glitter on her eyelids had faded just enough to make her look even more like herself. I thought about how strange it was that only a few hours ago, I wasn't sure if she'd even talked to me. And now, here we were, two people who had shared something quiet, something small, but real enough to echo. "Do you want to walk out with me?" she asked. I nodded, too content to speak. We stepped through the exit together, the cool night air wrapping around us like a whisper. The parking lot buzzed with leftover excitement. Friends calling out to each other, parents waiting in cars, teachers keeping a loose watch over it all. Somewhere in the background, someone played music from their phone, too loud and scratchy. But it didn't matter. The real soundtrack was still playing in my head. That one slow song, the awkward rhythm of our feet, her laughter right in front of me. We walked slowly, not in a hurry to reach anywhere. It wasn't about the destination anymore. It was about preserving the feeling, like pressing a flower between pages to keep it alive just a little longer. I didn't know what to say, and for once, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. "I don't want to forget this," she said after a while, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "You won't," I replied, not because I was being optimistic, but because I truly believed it. There are nights that etch themselves into you so gently that you don't notice until much later, when a certain smell or song or color brings them all back like a sudden wave. We reached the spot where her dad's car was parked, headlights off but engine idling softly. She turned to me, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear, and smiled. A smile without words, without any hidden meanings. Just gratitude, just something shared. "I'm really glad you asked me to dance," she said. "I'm really glad you said yes." We stood there for another beat or two. I didn't expect anything more. No dramatic kiss, no promises, no fairy tale endings. And that's what made it perfect. It wasn't the ending of something. It was the closing of a chapter you knew would stay with you long after you'd moved on. She stepped into the car, gave me one last wave, and disappeared into the night like a dream, fading right as you wake up. I stood there watching the taillights blur into the distance, feeling that strange combination of joy and ache, like you're smiling with a lump in your throat. As I walked toward the edge of the lot, I passed groups of friends buzzing with leftover adrenaline. Some were already taking off their shoes, some were making late-night plans, and some were just standing there, looking up at the stars like they were trying to bottle the feeling of youth before it slipped through their fingers. I didn't join them. I just kept walking, quietly tucking the night into the pocket of my memory. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, shoes still on, bow tie half loosened. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of floorboards. I didn't want to change out of my clothes. They still smelled like perfume and cafeteria punch, and a little like that strange hope that only exists between dusk and midnight. I turned off the light and lay back, staring at the ceiling. My body was tired, but my mind was replaying everything. The way the gym looked under soft lights, the way her dress shimmered when she twirled by accident, the way our hands found each other like it had been meant to happen. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's story. And yet I knew I'd lived it. I'd really been there. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up and thinking it had all been a dream. For a brief moment, it felt too good, too fragile to be real. But then, I looked over and saw the boutonniere she had pinned to my lapel still lying on the desk, a little wilted now, but still beautiful. That's when I knew it had happened, and I smiled, because no matter where life would take me next, no matter how messy or ordinary things might become, there would always be that night, that single flickering stretch of time when I danced in a gym full of lights and laughter and possibility, when I faced my fears and took a chance, when I felt seen, when I felt alive. It wasn't just a prom. It was a memory pressed like a VHS, taped deep into the shelf of my heart. Fuzzy, a little grainy around the edges maybe, but forever there, waiting for the right song, the right scent, or the right quiet night to rewind and play again. And when it does, I'll close my eyes and smile because I lived it.